And now, your weather authority.
It seems to be calming down at least a little bit outside the station right here. What about maybe the rest of the coast?
Yeah, just a bit. We're in the bit of a lull, though, so don't get used to it. It's kind of a trick, if you will, on the mind across the Gulf Coast, because we saw the first half of the system move on through ahead of the warm front that began lifting to the north and northeast. And as that happened, we saw the first batch of storms move on through the Gulf Coast as well. But then we're going to see a lull because we'll be right in that open warm sector, quickly followed by the warm front, or the cold front rather, on the backside. The warm front moved on through and up out the door. And now what we're seeing is the lull in the middle, and then on the backside we'll see that cold front move through with the squall line advancing across the area as well. But as of now, what we're seeing across the area is winds. You can really see those on the Scarlet Pearl Tower camera beginning to whip across the area as well, and you continue to do so over the past few hours, and will continue to do so for the next few following that as well. Almanac's going to show daily highs pretty similar to what they were for this particular day on the calendar for many years back, but those lows are a little bit different. You'll notice those a little bit warmer as well, a decent bit warmer, because that daytime heating was retained by a lot of cloud cover that flowed into the area and really retained a lot of that heating as we move through the overnight hours. That's what we're going to see is double-edged sword, if you will, because a lot of that daytime heating was retained. We're actually going to stay fairly comfortable, but when you retain all that heating ahead of this frontal system, it's a lot of fuel for those thunderstorms to feed off of, and that's what we'll examine in just a moment. As for our severe threat today, here's what we're looking at. The outlook that's been outlooked all day, and outlook that will continue to be throughout the overnight hours, is this orange shade here, issued as a level 3 out of 5 severe risk. That's known as enhanced. This yellow shade here, a level 2 slight risk out of 5, and then a level 1 out of 5 marginal risk in dark green there. The mint shade you're seeing as the potential for thunderstorms. Now here's the overall synoptic scale layered on top of your pattern throughout the daytime hours today, and here's what happened as you saw that system begin to increase in some decently heavy mountain snow out towards the west. The whole system began shifting towards the south and southeast, and as that occurred, we started to see that rainfall start to stack up on the Gulf Coast. And as we've moved into the overnight hours, we're starting to see the whole frontal system advance towards the south and southeast as the system's actually pulling to the north-northeast, but that rainfall appears on the radar like it's moving in that general direction when you take a look at it from the synoptic scale. But here's a look at what's going to happen over the overnight hours tonight. As you're seeing a whole lot of parameters kind of matched up together, it might be a little confusing if you don't really break it down. So here's what's occurring. A lot of this warm, moist air out ahead of the frontal system is still sticking in place, and as we saw that warm front begin lifting to the north and northeast, it left behind us a lot of warm, moist, and humid air. And ahead of our next frontal system, or it's actually the same frontal system, but it's the back side of it, that cold front, it's going to drop down and it's going to pull through the area. And a lot of this warm, humid, and moist air is being drawn up into the Mississippi Gulf Coast ahead of that frontal system, and it's going to feed off of that and increase the chance for not only some heavy winds, damaging winds at that, some hail and some heavy rain, flooding, and even a few spin-up tornadoes aren't completely ruled out, but a few may be even a little bit stronger if they occur here on the Mississippi Gulf Coast. That's not to say we're going to see one, but we could at some point during the evening, which is why that tornado watch and severe outlook is in place. Now, this is just a general map here that's going to show you where the biggest chance for gusty winds is over the next day to a day and a half here. It'll last until tomorrow at about 11 p.m. This is really kind of a secondary threat to what's going to occur through the overnight hours relating to that severe weather potential. So we'll move on from that and move on into rain potential over the next day or so. You're really going to see that stack up here over the Mississippi Gulf Coast and the entirety of the southeast, and continuing on into tomorrow, that low pressure system will also advance to the north-northeast, so it's going to continue dropping rainfall not only here in the south, but as it moves to the north and east, maybe even provoke a wintry threat up in that general direction. But here what we're going to see tonight, as you saw the frontal system, the front half, as I mentioned, that warm front began lifting to the north and northeast, left us in what we call the warm sector, and then behind that, that cold front's pushing downward, which is why you're seeing that long line of storms, a linear segment pushing towards our area. Really lined it up in a pretty state that actually lined up that the line of storms rather. It kind of lined it up pretty for you, and you can see it on the screen here right where that cold front is starting to push on through the overnight hours. But right now we're seeing that lull here towards Mississippi. that's really not going to last, as eventually that cold front will move through and pack a punch. Now what we're watching for is what we call discrete supercell development through the overnight hours, and should this push down towards our area and that start to occur, that's where the biggest concern is as we move overnight. That's pretty much a given that at some point we'll continue to see those high winds, that heavy rainfall, and maybe some flash flooding, but following that, that secondary threat is definitely that discrete supercell development through the overnight hours. But this red shade you see here, it's more of a maroon shade, if you will. This is all the tornado watches that are in place across not only southern Mississippi, but parts of Alabama and parts of southern Louisiana as well. These blinking green boxes you see, these are flash flood advisories and flash flood warnings. Not really a concern here at the moment, but they certainly could be when this frontal system starts to approach. Now, as we take a step back here and take a look over towards the north and west, this shade here, and you notice these all along this line, this white box, the cream box there, is a special weather statement and a special weather advisory. That's indicating an area that the National Weather Service has pinpointed to watch as we move into the overnight hours, because that's an area where storms could develop rather quickly. And really they kind of drew it across the whole linear segment, because that whole line of storms could become pretty concerning as the night progresses. Temperatures right now into the mid-60s across the Mississippi Gulf Coast, so you just saw that warm front move on through. Actually really juiced up our atmosphere ahead of the backside of this frontal system, which is why we're decently concerned as it moves on through, which you can kind of get the picture. If you feel the temperature outside is 66 degrees at 9 o'clock at night, you could probably figure out the pump is primed for probably some rough weather. But Mobile seeing about 23 miles per hour in wind speeds. Gulfport still at 18, so those winds continuing to whip through the area. Remember, we're going to see those overnight lows not much lower. We've actually probably seen most of the overnight lows for tonight. But into tomorrow, we will clear out decently quickly. And then as we move into the rest of the week, what we're going to see is the backside of this frontal system will move on through, and as it does so, we'll continue to monitor the potential for storms developing from this particular system. Behind it, though, you can see by tomorrow evening at the latest, we'll really be cleared out. So definitely not all that bad. We'll definitely take it. And one day of storms,
Okay.
move on.
Yeah, move on. All right, thanks. What's your name? Trey. I almost said Jevin. I don't know why, because Jevin's coming up next, so stay with us.